Pour yourself a cold one.
Let's drink 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it is Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years now, a bunch of podcasts. Last night, by the way, Warren Sharp talking strength of schedule, the new overtime rule, whether people will kick or take the ball. I thought was really interesting. Certainly check out the latest Ross Tucker football podcast if you haven't already. Later on the day, we'll get into the Masters a little bit, the national championship game tonight, as well as our first peek at NFL season win totals on the Even Money podcast. The star of this show, though, as you know, is my guy, Emory Hunt. There is nobody better at FBall Game Plan on Twitter. Football Game Plan on YouTube. And if you don't already have it, you're missing out because I already have mine. Footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. Emory, how are you?
I am doing fine, man. How are you based off what happened this past week?
Oh, my God. You know what's funny? So, and we'll get to Gene Clemons in a second because I'm fired up that Gene's on the show. I did not get punched in the eye. I am an idiot who tried to pass my brother-in-law skiing going like 50 miles. I'm not exaggerating. He was going 46 and I was passing him. And I hit my head face first into the snow. I got cuts on my chin, nose, and forehead. That's hard to do. And I got this black eye. I was actually feeling okay for a while. I woke up yesterday. I could not move my neck. So that doesn't seem real good. But at any rate, the show must go on. And I don't know a whole lot about Gene Clemons. I'm not going to lie. Here's what I do know. That when Emory says this is my guy, I get fired up. And the fact that he's a writer tells me a lot. A coach tells me a lot. And a podcaster. Gene, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to talking ball with you guys as we do all the time.
All right. So he's at Gene Clemons on Twitter. You can find him on YouTube, Coach Gene Clemons. He writes for The Athletic. I mean, you got a lot going on, Gene. So I want to make sure I know the whole spectrum. So can we get your background and also all the different things you got going on in your life right now for our listeners and viewers on youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL?
Yeah, so I was a 3-sport athlete, pretty much through the first half of college before I was almost forced out of declining physical injury to focus just on one, football, basketball, and track. And I was always into writing. I've always been a big fan of the written word. And so I was a journalism and theater double major in college. Which kind of, I think, helped set me up for what I do now. I teach, I coach. Obviously, I have a few podcasts. I write for The Athletic, and I write for GiantsCountry.com, where I do a lot of film breakdown and player evaluations over there. We've been 10 toes down at Football Game Plan now for the better part of, 10, 11 years now, Emory?
It feels like it. I would say so, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, between all of those things, it's just various avenues to try to continue to do what I love to do, which is talk about sports, talk about football, and spread the good word.
Wow. Gene, the more you talk, the more interesting you get. Journalism and theater double major is amazing, by the way. That's awesome. And how did you play 3 sports in college? Where did you go?
I went to Fitchburg State College in Massachusetts for a couple of years. Lower level ball, you don't have as much crossover in seasons as you do at the higher levels because we're regimented into how many games we can play. So it was almost like high school where the end of football season runs up against the beginning of basketball season. So my last game for football would be like a Saturday, and that next Tuesday would be the first basketball game. And so it was just me going from one sport to another. There's no spring in Division III, which helps to not get in the way of track and field. But everything kind of played off of one another, where I was able to use football to go into basketball, to then go into track, and then summer doing basketball, pro-ams and things of that nature, until finally my body was like, you're gonna have to choose one, or we're gonna break everything. And so at that point, I chose football. I ended up transferring to Arkansas Tech University, where I finished out my studies in playing football.
That is awesome. And I know we talk about Division I guys a lot, but you played 3 sports in college. You are an absolute stud. I know the head coach, Scott Sperone, by the way, at Fitchburg State, the head football coach now up there. So that's interesting. I'm actually familiar with Fitchburg State. Where are you coaching now, Gene?
I'm in Georgia, in Savannah. I actually teach at Jenkins High School. You are currently in my classroom, and you cannot see them, but I have students in the back. This is my journalism class, so they're getting a firsthand experience of how this thing goes. But I teach at Jenkins High School. I coach at Johnson High School. I'm the defensive coordinator there, which is right down the street from Jenkins, and just plugging along, doing what we do.
That is awesome, man. How did you guys connect, Emory?
Through a mutual friend and Chris James, who I've known Chris since we were in 7th grade. So we were like 12 years old, and he knew Gene. And I went down to cover the East-West Shrine game, and we went to this karaoke bar where Gene was there. He introduced me to Gene, and that's how we became connected.
How good is Gene at karaoke?
Gene is I haven't heard Gene at karaoke. I've heard Gene DJ, but Chris is a karaoke guy. Like, no matter where we are, whether it's Indy at the Combine or any one of these All-Star games, Chris will find a karaoke bar, and he kills the Young MC song, Bust the Move. That's his go-to.
Hey Ross, to answer your question, like I am too good at karaoke. I get mocked a lot because karaoke is not supposed to be for people who can sing, and I can actually sing. I think when Emory met me, I was DJing, I was KJing that night when we first met. And there may have been a few oat sodas thrown back that day as well. So some of the memory might be a little bit twisted, but yeah, definitely always down for a good karaoke.
Gene, you should be the next guy on the Dos Equis commercials for like the world's most interesting man. I mean, you got the double theater, you got the double major, you did the theater. I've actually met that guy, by the way, the original most interesting
Really?
man.
I bet that was – is he really interesting, or is it just like he's a normal Joe Schmo?
No, he's just like some older actor in New York. You know what's funny about it, though? I don't want to blow up his spot or not, but he was drinking a Corona, and like his wife came out of nowhere before we took the picture and like swiped the Corona. Like, you could ruin everything. Get the Corona out of your hand, man.
That's hilarious. That is funny.
All right, let's dive into these tight ends. So we've been doing a positional breakdown. By the way, Emory, I don't know how we did this, but it's going to be tough to get to all the defensive guys. But we're going to do tight ends today. Here's what I don't understand. Nobody's talking about the tight ends. I mean, I feel like I have not heard anybody say anything about – are they that bad, Emory? Why is there no discussion at all about the tight ends in this draft class?
Everybody's still talking about the same 5 quarterbacks and Traylon Burks. So once they get outside of just talking about the same 9 players in the draft, they'll realize how deep this class is, and the tight end group more specifically is phenomenal this year. And I realized that everyone was talking about the Senior Bowl crop. There's going to be a great group of tight ends at the Senior Bowl. But when I went out to the NFLPA game, I was like, man, some good tight ends out here. Go to the Shrine Bowl. I'm like, man, there's some really good tight ends out here. Then they get to the Senior Bowl with their impressive crop. So, yeah, this is a really good class of tight ends.
So I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you set this up or not, but we had some guy tweet us say Hey, Emory, when you break down the tight ends, can you break them into inline tight end, flex tight end, H-back? I wanted to say to the guy, like, don't you listen or watch the show? That's exactly what Emory's going to do. Emory's the only guy I know that has 12 different wide receiver positions and 7 different tight end positions. So let's start with your number one inline guy, Emory, and that's Cade Otten.
Yeah, I feel like Otten was criminally underutilized at Washington. And when we talk about inline, we're talking about someone that can block, just as good as he can catch the football. So block first, he's good at that. He was also doing a great job in the run game. But as far as a receiver, I feel like he's underutilized, and he's going to be a better pro than he was in college. I know people had concerns about the injury, but let's say he has a clean bill of health. To me, he was doing a lot of things you would ask your inline tight end to do. He was doing it at a consistent level.
Gene, what do you think of Otten?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if Otten's your stretch it down the field type of tight end from the inline, but I think he works really well in the intermediate area because he has that ability to block, and he comes from an offense where he was asked to legitimately block as well as working that. I think it works perfectly for those teams who really like to lean on the play action to try to slow down the pass rush as a guy that can get out into the intermediate areas and work. I think he still has to work on his footwork in the secondary, getting in and out of breaks. But I like what he does with his hands. And anytime you can have a tight end that uses their hands more when they're catching, they're going to be better for it.
Emory, talk to me about Trey McBride from Colorado State, because I did at least one of his games, maybe 2 games at Colorado State. Do you have him listed as an inline tight end? And if so, why do you like Otten better?
For me, Otten is one of those guys that, where you see him blocking, you just kind of like, all right, he does a lot of things well. And I have McBride as an H-back because I feel like he could be put on the move a little bit more so. And his blocking, to me, is more conducive to where you want him out there on the move, on a perimeter, or kicking out some defensive end or some linebacker, more so than inline. Probably more so because of his length or lack thereof at the position. So I have him more detached as opposed to where he's going to be down in, down out on the point of attack. But he's a really good player. He's my number 5 H-back at the position.
So it's interesting because it seems like he's ranked higher, Gene. And I just remember when they played Fresno State, like he'll get after people as a blocker. I mean, he's trying. So a lot of times you don't see that anymore. So I'm a little surprised that Emory doesn't have Trey McBride ranked higher. How do you see him?
Well, I think him and likely, if you were talking overall tight end prospects, not even considering like inline or flexed out or whatever, I think likely and McBride are your 2 guys that are going to be the type of guys that NFL people get excited over because of their ability in the passing game. McBride is a guy who can push the defense down and be a stretch guy for you. But I would agree with Emory. His physicality, it's almost Evan Ingram like. He's willing, but I think when you get up against some of the more physical defenders down there on the line of scrimmage, he's probably not going to be able to hold up, play in and play out. And do you really want to use a guy who's that good of a receiver as an inline blocker all the time, but do you want to Cameron Brate him? And I think that's what you figure out. Is he a Nick O'Leary, Cameron Brate type of guy? He's tough. He's tough. He's durable. Put him into positions to make plays as a receiver, and don't really waste him when you have so many other guys that can block for you in line.
Emory, let's talk about flex tight ends. Your number 1 guy is Gerrit Prince from UAB. And it feels like this is becoming more and more of a thing, though, right? I mean, Mike Gesicki, he's really a tight end in name only. He might even fight the franchise tag, although I guess he signed it already, so maybe he's not going to fight it. But it seems like there's more and more of these guys. They're called tight ends, but I don't know if I saw Gesicki ever put his hand in the dirt in line. I mean, I'm sure he did a couple times, but this is actually a real position. I don't know if we call it flex tight end or big receivers, big slots. Is there that much of a difference between a flex tight end and a big slot at this point?
Maybe about 20 pounds, and that's probably about it, because you get some big slot receivers that are just as physical as some of these flex tight ends. But for Gerrit Prince, it was like he was someone that I saw. You watch him passing during the season because we cover college football, but you don't really study these prospects. So you watch a UAB game, and here's this guy just running down the seam, making plays. You think he's a receiver with how fast and fluid he's moving. So when I get to the Shrine game, I'm like, wow, this dude really, he really has some juice with him. I spoke with him. He's from Kansas City, so he's a city guy. He has some sauce at the top of his route. He was out there barbecuing defensive backs as well. So that's about as all the KC barbecue references I get in there. But he's someone that is very like Travis Kelce in a sense that, he is fluid in his route running. He has some savvy in his route running. I was surprised he wasn't a combine invite. I thought that's the type of guy that gets to the combine to showcase that athleticism, but he didn't go. And so he's someone I think will be a clear-cut draft pick outside of the combine invites because of how well he plays.
What did you think, Gene, of Gerrit Prince?
Same as Emory. I like the way he gets in and out of his breaks. I think that's the real key for him, and what he does, as a receiver. I don't really see much of him being an inline guy at the next level. I think he'll be your move receiver. I think he's got a little aggressiveness when it comes to blocking out in space that he could use to his advantage. But really, he's going to make his bones, trying to shake people off of him at that intermediate level. I wouldn't have him as my number one guy. For me, my number one flex end is Isaiah Likely. But I think that, both of those guys are going to have really they're really going to surprise. Like, he's going to go into a team and get immediate snaps, because when you can get loose, especially in the intermediate area where they're putting a lot of the star guys, like Jalen Ramsey is lining up on you now instead of, Joe Schmo that they just put down who might be an outside linebacker. They're putting that star defender on those slot guys like that now. And to be able to get loose and get away from those guys, it's only going to bode well for Prince and a guy like Likely.
I'm glad, Emory, you brought up Travis Kelce, because I think it's important when we talk about draft prospects to, let's talk about the best guys and what makes them so good. Kelce wasn't like a 4.5 40 guy, right? I mean, I don't remember what his combine numbers were. What is it, Emory, about Kelce that makes him so productive?
It's the fluidity and the nuance within his route running, and he knows how to use leverage against a defender. It's almost like that old kung fu type deal where I'm going to use your own leverage and momentum against you. I don't have to be the strongest. I just have to know how to use momentum and leverage to my advantage. And that's what guys like Kelce are able to do. That's what a guy like Jeremy Shockey was able to do in terms of how he ran. Now, he was probably maybe a better athlete in terms of testing than Travis Kelce, but same type of, ability as a route runner in terms of, okay, I know where you're leaning towards, so I'm gonna just cut it off right here and just snap this off and set up shop, or I'm gonna lean into you a little bit, get you to go, one way, then I'm gonna break it off and go the opposite way and explode out that break. So it's that little fluidity of a receiver that he brings to the tight end position, but it also shows you a lot of guys that played a lot of football growing up or played a lot of basketball growing up, to where you have some extra moves with you to know how to free yourself from tight coverage, or in basketball from someone that's covering you very tightly. So I think that's where the Kelces of the world tend to separate themselves from how well they're able to get open from a route running perspective.
If I can add something real quick, I think it's body, it's body control, right? We all kind of make light of the fact that he'll go into the end zone and start dancing, but watch him dance. It's legit. He dances. He's a legitimate dancer, and that type of body control is what you see him use to get loose from defenders a lot of times. Being able to control his body is where you see those guys separate themselves from the guys who are really more just like jump ball guys. They're just big. Like Gronk has the same type of thing. Like when you see Gronk move, He's so big that sometimes it looks goofy, but it's the body control that he has that makes him so special. It's not the speed and it's not the height. It's the ability to put that body in a place where nobody else can get the ball but him.
So I'm glad you mentioned that too. And I should have done this from the start. Who would you got? Like, I think for each one of these positions, Emory, since we're discussing three different tight end positions, really the inline tight end, the guy that's got his hand in the ground attached to the tackle, the flex tight end, I think people can picture that, the guy that flexes out. Next up will be the H-back. But in terms of inline tight end, the NFL right now, in your mind, who fits that category? Gronk? Who else is like a true inline guy?
Oh man, I would probably always go back to someone like Jason Witten, right? Like to me, that would be the inline guy. But Gronk is the ideal inline for today's game. And Kelsey, to a certain extent, has gotten a little bit better as a blocker. He could be considered that, but he's more of the flex type, in my opinion. Him and someone like a Gesicki, like you talked about. But I would say Gronk would be more of the inline guy. O.J. Howard couldn't be considered an inline guy or a flex guy because he was very good at blocking coming out of Alabama. But I would always go to Witten, someone that's a bigger body guy that can block, but also get down the seam and make those receptions that you need to make over the middle of the field.
I think, Gene, would you consider Goddard for the Eagle? He's an inline guy, right? I mean, he'll attach and he'll block a little bit.
I think Goddard is supposed to be an inline guy. I like to see him be more aggressive in his blocking. I think George Kittle is definitely an inline guy.
Yeah.
The way he plays the game is just another level of physical. He just happens to have all the skills to play wherever the hell he wants to on the field, and that's what makes him great. I think that's what separates the Gronks and the Kittles and the Kelseys from everybody else, is because you can ask them to do all three different jobs and they can do them at a high level. Whereas maybe in O.J. Howard, obviously hands aren't where you want them to be at. Goddard, good hands, great receiver, blocking not where you want it to be at. Even a Zach Ertz, who people go to all the time, has been a really good receiving tight end, but isn't really known for his blocking. So you see these different really good receiving prospects, but they have different talents, and there's only like the small handful that you could ask to do everything, and they can do it at a high level. Darren Waller is a flex end.
Yeah,
as big and as big and as phenomenal as he looks, he's not an inline tight end. And so every time you ask him to play inline, you're not going to get the same results as you would get from a Gronk, even though people still want to call him a tight end. He's a wide receiver in a tight end's body.
Emory, before we get to your number one H-back, who's an H-back or two for the people to have in mind to picture the NFL? Who do you put into that category?
See, I will put Kittle in the H-back category, but you could also throw his fullback, Kyle Juszczyk, in that H-back category because he was a tight end at Harvard.
So both the Niners tight end and fullback are both actually H-back. No, I'm messing with you because I know what you mean. They can just move those. H-back, you mean, is essentially like a movable chess piece.
Is a movable piece. They could be fullbacks. They could be guys that you put in the slot. They could be detached on the line of scrimmage. I see that position probably more versatile than the inline and flex guy. I feel like the inline and flex guy are kind of defined by where they can be, but the H-back, you can even hand them the footballs, which we see San Francisco do multiple times. And think about we are old school here, but you think about somebody like Jim Jensen. Remember him from the Dolphins?
Number 11.
They kind of did a lot of different things. You didn't really know what position he was, but that's the type of guy I see Kittle and Juszczyk is. They could do so much out there on the field. They could play anywhere, to be honest, whether you want them to take some handoffs or to really line up and block someone in line.
Your number one H-back, I'm convinced, was at Wisconsin for 9 years, Jake Ferguson. Tell me about Ferg.
Legit good all-around football player, great hands. And you're right. I feel like we've been talking about him, forever, but you realize then it's Troy Fumagalli and it's multiple players that have played tight end at Wisconsin, but everyone kind of looks like Jake Ferguson, right? And so I just think that because he's so polished in what he does, he's a plug-and-play guy, the best at the position. We've seen him in the backfield. We've seen him, detached. We've seen him be aggressive in his blocking and how well he is at the catch point. Really good receiver. Opens up their offense to me, honestly, more so than what they do. I know they got a great tailback that we're going to talk about in a few years, but he is the straw that stirs the drink, in my opinion.
Gene, your thoughts on either Ferguson or if you have an H-back you like better?
No, I think Ferguson is really nice. He's taller than you would see out of most H-backs, which I think helps him at the next level. We used to all get pigeonholed, right? I was a 6'3" guy. I was a movable piece. I would have been your prototypical H-back back when I was coming through, and I played tight end. But now you're seeing that position can go anywhere between a 6'1" and a 6'5" guy. And so I think he's taller, but he has really good bend that allows him to stay low, get up underneath the pads when he has to do some blocking. But I do like what he brings to the table as a movable chess piece in the pass game. And anytime you're averaging, a first down or over a first down or reception, you're going to be really valuable in the passing game. And let's not be mistaken. Nobody's taking tight ends high anymore just to block. So if you're not catching the ball, if you're not a plus in the receiving game, then you're going to drop precipitously in the draft. And that's why you can tell all the guys that we're talking about are guys who bring plus to the table as pass receivers like he does.
In terms of sleepers, Emory, please tell me that Darian Hambrick is not like Troy Hambrick's son.
He I think he is, man. I think he's his son or maybe his nephew or something. But yeah, the family connection is there. And he was a receiver at Texas A&M Kingsville. I kind of wish they go back to Texas A&I. That was just a cooler name. But he was a receiver there and kind of grew into what he's going to be asked to do at the NFL level, a flex tight end. I know he was at the College Gridiron Showcase, I believe. But someone that plays a game like a receiver, you thicken him out. He's going to take that Ricky Seals-Jones type of, approach, or that I forgot the guy from Iowa State, Butler is his last name. But you're going to take that approach and move him to tight end. So he's someone that's a developmental prospect at the position.
I was teammates with his dad or uncle 20 years ago, so the timing's probably about right for that, actually. What about you have down, Emory, underrated Armani Rogers. So maybe wasn't Armani Rogers a quarterback?
Yes, at one point in time, I do believe he was a quarterback. But I don't know why this is, but the quarterback to tight end or H-back flex guy transition seems to be one that we see a lot, especially because we see a lot of bigger, more athletic quarterbacks that kind of eat themselves out of the position, maybe, or we're going to bring you in as a quarterback, but we're really thinking about moving you anyway. We just want to get you on campus. I think that was the situation with him. Obviously, we all know Travis Kelce being one of those famous quarterback to tight end transitions. But I think what happens when you go from quarterback to almost any position is you bring a level of awareness about the field. And I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about is understanding the field and understanding where we are on the field and how we work within the system. That's something I've seen him do pretty well on film.
Check him out on social media at Gene Clemons, the world's most interesting man. I love the fact that this counts as you teaching your class right now. You not only are you interesting, you're very smart right there, Gene. I love it. Check him out at Gene Clemons on Twitter, and then the awesome YouTube page, Coach Gene Clemons. That way you can see all the stuff he's writing. You can see the videos he puts up. Awesome stuff, Gene. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Absolutely, without any question. Next week, we will dive into the offensive linemen, my area of supposed expertise. Really looking forward to it. Check us out at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. He's at F-Ball Game Plan on Twitter, Football Game Plan on YouTube, and of course, now, footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. Bye. The keg is kicked. I'm all tapped out.
Thanks for listening to the College Draft Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, Even Money, and The Business of Sports. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.